Batten. She's the founder of The Growing Edge, and she's a holistic trauma therapist here in New Jersey. Heather, can you tell us a little bit about you, how you started The Growing Edge, and what your journey to becoming a therapist has been like?
Sure. It's so good to be here with you, Gabby. Like, I just, I say it every time. Like, I just appreciate the work that you put in into building a network, and um, I'm super excited to like connect with anyone who follows you and the network that you're building. Um, so I started the Growing Edge like 9 years ago, and it's been in a lot of different um, formations. And like before that, I became a licensed clinical social worker and have been doing trauma work and therapy and consulting in lots of different venues. And so kind of the iteration of the Growing Edge is in right now um, is did it freeze? Oh, okay. It's
You're
frozen
good.
on my end. Okay. It's so funny. So and a friend of mine laughs at the name, right? Like the Growing Edge. It's like really like and it manifests in the way that I do my work, in that I'm like kind of always like I get somewhere and I'm like, oh, there's like farther to go. Um, so where I'm at kind of right now is kind of combining a lot of like the work that I've done in um, racial justice and social justice organizing, and kind of like a political framework, and like spiritual growth, and um, like psychology, and understanding like family systems, and kind of the abuse of power that can come in all of those ways. Um, and how like when we kind of like interact with all of these systems, and like in our family and our culture and our organizations, and that there can be abuses, there can be injuries, there can be harm that like separate us from who we are meant to be, and what is our intuition, and what is our truth. So that's a lot of my focus with the clients that I work with, is how to reconnect those pieces. And I think we're in a place right now where a lot of us are struggling, like me included, sometimes, of like what like the world has kind of turned upside down, and like you know where are where am I, like what is my purpose, like everything that was working for me is not working anymore. And I think there's a lot of things that we can point to, like why that is. Um, and then there's part of me also like on a really like zoomed out like spiritual level, that there's like a purpose to that, right? And like there's like a we've been in a snow globe and like shaken up, and to kind of like be repositioned and reconnected. And so that's the work that I do with people, is like how to reconnect and find their strength again, and um, kind of to turn like what has been painful experiences, or even like kind of identifying that and putting language to it, and then using that to kind of like alchemize into what is their truth and their purpose, and like how can they then live the life that they know that they want to in their mind.
And I know that you mentioned before The Growing Edge, and I never thought to ask what is the meaning behind that name. I know you mentioned it a little bit more, a little bit
Yeah,
of like the edge that just keeps moving, but can you share a little bit behind
yeah.
the inspiration?
So initially, it came from my initial kind of like understanding of the phrase was in the anti-racist work that I do. One of the kind of like tenets of like our contract of how we kind of like hold ourselves accountable is that we sit with like our own growing edge. So when you feel like discomfort coming up, that also seeing that as an opportunity for growth, but like the seeing like both of those things at the same time. And there's also a poem by Howard Thurman that is titled The Growing Edge, that kind of talks about that, like as things are dying, new things are being birthed.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I had no idea. I was just like, "Oh, that's a really cool name." Like it's very unique, but the fact that it comes from the work that you do, and cuz the edge, almost like the boundary, like the precipice, like the what is that called when
Yeah,
something goes off into like a and like that you're constantly sitting with it, like that
yeah, yeah.
discomfort. And that is so beautiful. And what was your upbringing like? Like was your upbringing like? What was your like academic career like? What was Heather like as she was like growing up in this world? And where did you go to school and how did you choose therapy?
Um, so I grew up in New Jersey in like a very small suburb in Essex County, and things I thought were fine. And I went to undergrad at Bucknell and majored in biology and religion. And I don't know, like I didn't I don't know what I thought I was gonna do. I looked into like medical ethics or um I'm not sure, but I did get involved in like racial justice work in college, and that moved something in me in terms of like it just and I remember like as a little kid too, even like in kindergarten, like when someone was being like left out or treated
Mm,
unfairly or scapegoated, like I was very attuned to that. Like there's stories about like preschool, I'd be like having an issue with someone being left out. And so that like has really kind of carried through, and like I had that experience. It wasn't like an academic course or a major, but in when I was an undergrad at Bucknell, and then shortly after that I graduated, I worked in child welfare, and I spent a large part of, and ended up getting my master's in social work, and I spent a lot of my career after my graduate degree working with families where there's abuse, where there's significant trauma, um,
mm,
domestic violence, like really, really, really challenging circumstances. And so I've done like clinical work and in-home work and family work and with kids and adults and consulting then with staff who are doing that work. Um, and so that's also for me where I started to kind of, I think, here's the thing about like a lot of degree programs for a lot of us, like we get letters behind our name and like we kind of like feel like there's an expertise that we have, and it also can like distance us from our clients. And I feel
mm.
like for me, also, it might have in some ways done it might have done that and also done the opposite. And I kind of leaned into at another point, or like, you know, there by the grace of God, go I. Like it could be me. And
Yeah.
see, every time, like I like, but I feel very like um grateful for like the work and like the clients, because I think that there's so much that I learned from them as well. And like where I was able to, and I think like connect with like, oh, there was like experiences I had as a child that like I thought were normal, or that I saw happening around me that like just I wasn't aware that like how it impacted me or how it was impacting like family members. That through this work I was able to kind of like understand it better and understand myself better, and kind of see also how that's like playing out in the world, and how we are all like hurt in a way like by the systems that exist and by the way that we end up treating each other, and how also we can like walk through that. um but it is kind of that like that growing edge thing, or that like the only
Yeah.
way out is through, is that like we can't avoid that there is like a walking through some really like heavy difficult things in order to get there.
Wow. And I know that it, even just from talking with you, is very heavy work that you do.
Yeah.
How were there ever moments in your career where you're like, "That's it, I'm done. Like I'm this is too much. This is like I don't feel like I can help them all the way," or whatever it might be. But what are some of those, like, have there been any times where you face those kind of, you feel like you were kind of up against the wall? And if so, how have you overcome? Like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way? Because you said the Growing Edge has been open for, did you say 8 years?
Yeah,
Not,
9 years.
oh my gosh, I didn't know that it was, look at
Yeah.
you, Heather. So, like, 9 years, what has this looked like? And, like, what are some of the challenges you face? How did you overcome?
um I think, yeah, I mean, there's, like entrepreneurship is not easy. And I think for most of the years, I'm just like, I don't know how to like connect, or I don't like, and it's also like that the teacher often learns the lesson first. So I think a
Mhm.
lot of the things that like, because I don't rely on necessarily like an expertise and like a intellectual expertise, like for whatever reason, like I walk through a lot of these experiences first.
Mhm.
So the process of even just kind of like opening the growing edge kind of like opened the door for me to kind of like hit like all the things that I'm talking about are things that I have walked through. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think how to it like it's understanding kind of like myself at like what's happening in my body, what's happening like in my mind, and like how am I connected to something greater than myself too.
Mm.
Um, and I think, yeah, that's the part I think kind of like connecting to something greater has been what has helped me kind of like get to the point where like now I'm at the growing edge full time, is that like I can't force this like just with my willpower, that I have to kind of like rely on like the unfolding, and kind of like with the flow of how things are going. And like, I mean, we could call that the universe, we could call it God, like there's faith and surrender, all of that in there. But like, I think up until that point, I was kind of using like force and like my just determination and willpower, which is useful, but also that there's
Tiring.
something bigger than that. Yeah, right.
Yes, yes.
Right. And like, I mean, tiring for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
to rely on your own resources.
right.
Because I think that's what it almost is at the end of the day, to rely on your own. But then when you get to open up and you get to say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna pull from here and I'm gonna ask for help from here. And I think there's such a beautiful thing that happens when we open ourselves up to being open to receive help and to say, hey, I don't know who you're gonna send it through. I don't know how it's gonna come, but I trust that it's gonna come. And somehow when you have that trust, it almost always ends up happening. It's
Right.
not always in the way that we thought it was going to, right? That new car, well, you ended up getting the new car a different way. But
Right.
I think that's always so beautiful when when women open themselves up, the amount of, and one of my favorite sayings is, well, how does the light come in? Well, it has to come in through the cracks. And
Right.
you have to allow yourself to break, to see the cracks where the light needs to shine in. And
Right.
it must be such an interesting and beautiful thing walking along people as the light comes into some of those cracks. Because
Yeah.
when we deal with things like intergenerational trauma, you become the quote unquote black sheep of the family, right? Let's say you're calling out things, you're noticing things, and at first you were silent, but then you started to really realize that no one else is helping hold this abuser or this person with power accountable for their actions that are then hurting everyone else. And it can be extremely isolating to be the person that says, hey, something's not right here. It hasn't been right for years and most likely actually generations. This has been passed down.
Right.
And I'm going to distance myself because I need to do the work. I know no one else wants to do the work here and it's not your not your responsibility, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this work. What is like some of the transformations, or what are some of the new thoughts or new beliefs that some of your clients have found, or like what have been some of your favorite transformations from clients that you've worked with over the years?
Yeah. I mean, um, I think I work with a lot of women that they're when they're able to kind of like trust themselves. Because I
Mm,
see like, there's such a challenge in society with like being a woman, but there's so much power that we have. Like just like that we're a portal like to heaven, to another
life.
world, and like we're
Yeah.
bringing that forth. And like there's so much power in that, and there's so many things that have disconnected us from that. And so there's like several women I'm thinking of that are at like different stages of like finding like, oh, this is the way that I've been impacted and like disconnected from that. And like now I'm connected to like what I really want, and like the way that they can kind of like then
Mm,
manifest like changes and trust themselves and just like take leaps that they, you know,
didn't
weren't
even think
willing or
were
able to take
possible.
before. You know, and in the past kind of
Mhm.
thinking like, oh, I'm and this is another thing that I think that happens for a lot of people that I work with is like where I'm thinking like I'm the problem, like that there's a diagnosis that I have, or that these symptoms mean that there's something's wrong with me, and then it's figuring out, oh, I'm actually responding to the environment in like the best way that I can,
Yeah.
and now I can like I have more agency, I have more power to kind of like shift those responses towards like something that's going to be helpful to me instead of just reacting to this like trigger all the time.
Which is so when a woman learns to trust herself, it almost reminds me of like when my daughter first started to walk, or when my daughter, like, right, these monumental moments in her life where I was just like, "Oh my gosh, yes!" I think when I see a woman start to speak with conviction, start to own her story,
Yeah,
there's just this shift. Like you're saying, it's like this magnetic shift where it's almost like everything that was staying away because they weren't quite sure. Is she ready? Can she handle this? Can she do this? And then she's like, I can, I will, I'm going to. This is
right,
my life. And this whole like almost coming of age story that happens when you learn that you you can only abandon yourself for so long. You can only abandon your
right,
needs for so long. And I think a lot of us in some ways have been taught to neglect parts of
absolutely,
ourselves.
yeah,
Especially as women, we've been taught to neglect a whole lot of things of us, but throw that power to others and
right,
to help heal others, right? To become the
right,
mother for our partners, or to become, right, mothering everyone around us,
right,
and then we're left motherless. We're
right,
left kind of like the baby alone in a crib, and everyone's like, "Anyone gonna go pick her up? She keeps crying. Anyone gonna go like, anyone gonna go
right,
deal with her?" Like the problem child. But I think it's beautiful that you said that, to be able to, for these women to say, "This is my life. These are," because, oh my gosh, talk about being in environments that aren't for you, and realizing
right,
it actually wasn't me. I wasn't the problem, but
right,
the environment that I was allowing myself to be in was not an environment that I could thrive in, nor was it set up for me to thrive whatsoever. That was not the intention. And then you
right,
being able to say, do I want to continue staying in here? And if so, what boundaries would I place? What kind of promises am I going to make to myself and keep? And if not, how am I going to remove myself, and what will that look like? But
right,
that is so beautiful. I think sometimes as women, we blame ourselves for everything.
yep, all the time, yeah,
And it's such it's like the mind of a woman that has 9,000 tabs open, that is taking care of so many other people. And maybe it's time to sit down and be the generation that says, or be the first person in your generation that says, I know that that was something that I was taught, but I'm going to fill up my cup first, because I cannot continue pouring droplets out when I have nothing left,
yeah.
which I think
I
was a
see
big
that,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like there's so much I think i- in the generation of parents right now that
Yeah.
I hear them being really driven by like wanting to kind of like like they're consciously saying like I see that this was happening before, this was my childhood, and I want to do something different, and they're using their energy and their time and their focus to kind of like figure what that could look like. And it's
Yes.
it's challenging, right? Because how do we like walk a path that's never been walked before? It's like there is this leap of faith of like
Exactly.
I don't um I don't know what I'm doing. And we live in like a society and a system where it's like there are pathways that are well traveled, and it's very easy, not very easy, but like easier to kind of
Thing.
like walk that, and
Yes.
you can it's it's building the strength to kind of like step off of it and you know find your community and
Yeah.
find your voice and like find a way to trust yourself, but it is really challenging like to do that, but I'm not sure it's possible to do it alone. I mean, I think that there
No.
is like a, like a drawing inward and kind of like connecting to ourselves, but also like a finding like other people who are on that journey too. And like, I mean, and therapy being like one option of someone who can hold your hand through like finding that connection to yourself,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. One of my favorite things that my dad would tell me growing up, which was such a double-edged sword because I was like, "Okay, I get it, but come on." He would always say, "Hey, I know you're upset with me in this moment. I know that I'm not being the best parent that I could be, or I know that you want more from me and I'm going to need you to know that I'm doing the best that I can from what I've learned from before me.
Hmm.
Now, if this is bothering you, if the way that I'm doing this is not suiting you, this is for you to go and change with your children. Like I want you to I want to let you know that I know I'm not doing a great job. I know I'm doing the best that I can, but I hope that you know it's okay to go and do whatever works and like fix that. But and I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to sit and say, "Hey, I am flawed. I
Right.
am imperfect. I am sorry that it might feel like I am failing you, but please know that I'm doing the best that I can. And maybe it's on your shoulders to do better, right? Because it's like, okay, fine, but I'm 15 or like I'm 17, like I don't know when I'm gonna have kids and how am I gonna write this? But now that
Right.
I'm in the thick of early motherhood, I know exactly what he meant. I know exactly what he meant, where
Right.
we can fall to the level of the circumstances, right? Of those who, because it's so easy for me to then just resort back to the way that I was raised. But it's one of the hardest things to sit and to say, wait, 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 let me sit with these sensations. Let me sit with these feelings. Why didn't I like it? And what am I going to do better for my children? And how am I going to show up
Right.
differently for my children? And then knowing it still might not be right. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, I still
Right.
might be a failure to that. Well, I use that like it's a big term, but in light term, really, mom, like, why I
Right.
got to do that? And I'm just trying the best that I can. And it's such a humbling experience to be on the other end where you're like, you see these two humans in front of you. Well, for me, it's two. For everyone else, it's like however many you have. And you're like, hey, I know mommy's trying the best that she can right now with the resources that she had. And that's exactly why I think that what you're saying is correct. If you're going to walk this path, if you're going to choose the path or whatever that saying is by Henry, I think Thoreau, or I forget
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
had that quote
Hmm.
of, if you're going to pick the path less chosen by others, there's going to come circumstances and consequences. But if you do get to find a community, if you do find someone that can say, hey, I have some clippers, let me cut that brush, so you don't have to stand there in front of a fallen tree for hours or for years. But having someone that can walk the path with you is so beautiful. And when we talk about the growing edge and we talk about therapy, what are some of the services that you have if someone's like, okay, I'm considering therapy, or I'm in therapy and I'm shopping around, excuse me, perhaps for a new therapist? What are some of the services that you offer and how can they get in touch with you? Sorry.
So the I do one-to-one therapy with adults who want to focus on that work. And I do free consultations so they can reach out to me to schedule and really talk about it's an opportunity to talk about what's going on and kind of get a sense of how I work and ask any questions before they're like actually committed to going forward. And I think that's an important part of the process is that people feel that they have the option to be in partnership with and get to know who they're going to be in partnership with and have a decision and ask questions. Um, and that kind of same thing that you're talking about with your dad, that there's like accountability in the relationship and that like I have some training, I have some expertise, I have some tools, I've walked this path. And also like I'm not the expert on your life. And so how can we partner together? And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's important for people, to do consultations with therapists and why I offer it. So that's the best way to work with me if for one-on-one. And I hope in the future, I'm thinking about having a course where I can share some of this in a so people don't have to or they can get this knowledge without doing just individual therapy and I can kind of like share it that way. And I also do coaching and training for organizations. But right now, a lot of my focus is on one to one work with individuals and kind of holding their hand through this process.
and they can find you at thegrowingedge.net.
Yes.
And on Instagram, they can find you at The Growing Edge.
Right.
And then
Yes.
on LinkedIn, Heather Batten, which I'll be sure to tag. You are Heather, I told you before, but I hope that you see and others will be able to share and pour into you the value of the work that you are doing, because there are so many people who are encountering this journey for the first time, and they feel like they're alone and that no one's on their side and they don't know who to turn to. And the fact that you are committed to doing this work and it's like your life's mission, and you show up so beautifully and like voraciously with so much love and kindness as well to hold space. I just want to thank you so much for the work that you do, and for being in the community, for being my community, for us meeting literally in my
Yeah.
actual community and my online
I
community.
know.
But it is so beautiful just seeing all of the work that you do, and I can't wait until you truly see the impact that you're making, because you're making a big one.
Thank you so much. I'm
Of
just so
course.
happy to know you and be connected to your community. And yeah, thank you
Thank
for,
you. Of course. Thank you for everyone that's watching as well. I hope you have an amazing day, and follow Heather, connect with her on LinkedIn. You heard the work that she does. So if you're interested at all, please have a conversation with her. Head to her website, thegrowingedge.net, to get that free consultation if she might be the therapist for you. But if you have employees, if you have anyone you work with, and this sounds like someone that you might want to chat more with, please connect with her. She is absolutely amazing and based out of Northern New Jersey. Thank you, Heather.
thank you, Gabby.